Howdy doodly doo. This is what I wanted to do all along. This episode at least tees up exactly what I wanted to do, which is I want to actually build something. In the past, I built this website, homebase.com. It hosted my podcast, Hang Out with Musicians. I have since not paid to maintain it, and so it is defunct. It doesn't work. The podcast doesn't work. I need to rebuild it. I'm rebuilding it on Urbit. In this episode, I talk about how the podcast is structured. I talk about like the basic tools that you use to make a website. Because this is a new thing, it might be an experimental shape of an episode. At the very least, this is going to be part one for when I actually do build something, because this was just catching up to not only what this website was, what this website was doing, what it aimed to do, but also converting that into an Urbit sense and even expanding what's possible because of it being on Urbit. We get into things like HTML, RSS feeds, using Sail, and dealing with a podcast inside of Urbit is a unique and odd thing. My name is Ben Brown, and I have a Patreon. I'm supported by these lovely folks around here. Patreon.com/brbenji. Over there, for as little as $2 a month or $15 a month, you can help me make the podcast. More importantly, half of it will go to my favorite charity, Give Directly, because there should be more money going over to Give Directly. The money doesn't go to Give Directly. They hand it right to the poorest of the world. And short-circuiting the classic money system where it's like, oh, money is printed in America and then it like flows down this little money river to the far reaches of the world. And every step of the way, it becomes less and less powerful and can buy less and less. I think short-circuiting it, for me, a little bit closer to that money faucet. What I can get out of the river, send it down river a little bit faster than it otherwise would have. It's a pretty big win for downstream. It's good stuff. Give Directly couldn't have enough money. I want to see more for them. Boop, 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 boop. I'm going to go lift heavy stuff because I joined a CrossFit and they're doing like international competitions. Enjoy the video. Da, 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 da. Only in the outdoor. Good morning. It is early in the morning. The lighting will get a little bit better. It is springtime, soon to be spring break even. Last night it seemed like it was going to storm. It had that like orange haze with like gray skies where you couldn't see the sun in the afternoon. And then now, sure enough, it thundered, it lightened, and there was a little bit of rain. I have this circle window over here. I'm just gonna like do a little bit of a flex about where I am, and we'll see if it looks okay. Here's a little sneak peek of the what we got going on here. That's our lovely circle window with our lovely wooded background. A little bit of orientation there. There's a lovely window there. Today, my desire, what I want to do, well, we finally have come to why I even wanted to make these videos in the first place. This is all a precursor. All those videos showing you what I had done was just to get up to this point, which is totally the meat and potatoes of this whole endeavor, which is I'm going to actually start making something. This one might be different from the other ones. I don't know how many different parts it might be broken up into. We'll cross that bridge as it goes. What do I want to do? I referenced it in the first video, the video with focus. I have this thing called Hang Out with Musicians. It is a podcast, Hang Out with Musicians, the podcast. I invite musicians that I went to school with, or that I just, friends of friends, sit down and we have a long form chat. The original idea was that I wanted to help my musician friends. I wanted them to leverage what they could on the internet. And the first step was definitely like, you just have to have some kind of content. And a lot of the musicians that I thought were really great, they didn't have any. And I was like, well, I'll throw out a podcast. I know how to do that. I'll just kickstart them in that kind of way. And so I had different ideas of what I thought the path for a musician should be. And I was trying to be pretty hands-on, and I was trying to help guide them through it to some excesses. But the podcast is actually quite fun. I really enjoy sitting down and just having those conversations. So that is now something that I want to continue doing. Although I kind of want to make it a little bit like of an Urbit bent. And, actually, if you're an Urbiter and you're into music, come contact me. Norris Mockwell, just message me. I know there's lots of people that are building Urbit that are musicians or were musicians, and I want to talk to them. Maybe wait till you can get a hold of one of these podcasts and hear how it goes. I'll be releasing these on YouTube once I have time after these kinds of videos. Well, what are we looking at here? This is a Squarespace website. It hosts the podcast. It hosts the podcast episodes. It serves them up, and people can show up here. They can click on episodes. There's links to whatever the other musicians are doing. Podcast starts like this.
Songwriting, it's often just sitting down with something either I'm uncomfortable with or something I don't understand about myself or relationship, trying to piece through what that looks like in my head.
Wow, so music as a way into empathy.
I sure think so.
I have such a crush on the cello.
I do too.
Yeah, me too.
You just want to curl up and spoon that cello.
Yeah, that's the feeling every time.
I do.
Yeah, so each musician gets their page. It links out to their music or whatever they're doing. It has all the different places you can listen to the podcast. But the thing is, this is all on Squarespace recently. This is homebase.com, HOWMbase.com. This is where I want it to live, but yipes. Website expired. I didn't pay this year's fee to Squarespace because I want to take all this that I built and remake it on Urbit. Right now, Squarespace, it doesn't allow me to do all the things that I would like to do. Let's break down the website in pieces and let's keep track of it on this guy. There you go. Okay, we can take our time. Oh my God, I never made that coffee. My heart is warm like a baked potato. Cannibal the Musical. It was from Spadoikel. Let's call this thing Home. That's the app that I want to make and have started making. In the past, I had the website, this one over here. I had Patreon. I had Discord. There was like all of the podcast stuff here on the bottom. The email collection is a really big deal. So like email, trying to get at like the complexity here. And whenever I say anything about the podcast or whatever I'm doing, I just say homebase.com. Go to homebase.com. That's where everything is. That's where you can find more things. URL is kind of like your business card that you're like passing to people. So like, you don't got to look at this just yet. Just here's the URL. Come check it out. Currently, I have all these different aspects. I want them all to be just like subsumed, eaten up into this vacuum. All of that I want right here. What is this app ultimately going to do? It's going to, I'm going to have a web page connected to homebase.com. It's going to serve up the podcast. I'm going to manage the podcast through it. No. Hey. Sorry. Penelope had surgery and she's not allowed to lick anything. Go to town. Put a collar back on it. Coffee? Hello. This is actually coffee today. I decided to go for coffee. I need a time today. The only limitation is if one of these devices turns off. So that's not a problem. Really put the pen in my pocket, right? Put it on the ground. I'm such a mess. World to know. Yeah. Does this ever happen to you guys? You with somebody, something bothers you, they get a focus, and then you radiate a little bit of something that like really bothers the other person, so they radiate something back that super bothers you, and then you get left alone. That happens to me all the time. That's a pattern, for sure. I thought maybe I would have something in these notes. It's also going to be a tunnel. It's going to be a connection to our group on Urbit. So it's going to handle all these things that are currently scattered across the internet. Like it was scattered across different companies and services and like people who have no alignment with me at all. I just care about the people that I'm talking with and the people that are listening. Whatever subset of them that would like to support me and support the musicians on an ongoing basis, I want to celebrate them and make it worthwhile for them to do so. If I was to try to make that a little bit more concrete, there's a thing called, this is going to be like super clinical and it's going to maybe be a little bit uncomfortable, but the word is a customer funnel. And the idea is you're trying to take people, trying to go from like an outer circle down into an inner circle. Some people call it a fan funnel. I don't know. You can't really make this stuff fun and humane. Like, what do they call it whenever you move like a cattle down like a certain path? I think there's a name for it. The funnel's pretty good of an idea. Like, you're going from a really broad audience who doesn't know who you are, and you're going to actually bring them down in steps until they're like a paying customer. Not everybody's favorite way of thinking about it. Definitely isn't mine. Let's work our way backwards, and we're going to use circles instead of funnels. Here at the bottom, here in the core, is patrons. Like, this is the closest group. This is almost like family, friends territory, but in like I suppose in like a work relationship or like a life's work kind of relationship. You have your patrons. That's the actual support. You don't necessarily want every single person to be there, but you want this to grow, because that's where you're going to get money and support, and also just like people who have skin in the game who care. You want people who care. That's going to be in the core group. From here, you're going to try to step people closer and closer to become more candidates into patrons. You can't just go from outer circle. You're not going to be able to take somebody who's a complete stranger, doesn't know you, doesn't care about you, doesn't know what you do. You're never going to be able to jump them from stranger right into patron. That's just not going to happen. What you can do, and I'll just like be totally transparent about my model here. There's strangers out in the world. They don't know about me. There's like, it's completely uncare. No care over there. I think what you do is you pick a social media. I've picked YouTube, and you go from stranger, and then strangers can drop down into acquaintance. I'm sure I totally botched that. Acquaintance. Leveraging social media to have things just magically appear to people. You just send out social media, whatever, to get people from not knowing, drop them down into acquaintances. They know it. They know about it. And then there's customer funnel. Oh, that's what it is. Sale funnel. Give me an image. Awareness, interest, desire, action. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, these things are reminding me. What's the next step? The next step is to get contact information. A lot of times, the most powerful thing to do is get an email. An email is powerful because if you have the list of emails, or like you have like their like phone number, as soon as you have that, now you can like actually be connected. Like, if you have them in on your phone, that's the next step after acquaintance. In this scenario, I have a YouTube video. It says to go to homebase.com. Here's my business card. Here's the podcast. You can get acquainted with it. Oh, there's a little bit of like a patron thing, and then you can also enter in an email here, get connected. That's the next step. A lot of times what you want to do is you kind of want to like sweeten that deal. Why would somebody give you an email? Is what you are going to email them like a really great newsletter? Are you going to email them some kind of free thing that they might really enjoy? That's called a lead generator. The thing that you're going to give for an email. Here, for completeness, those Urbiters, get that papi, baby. Maybe you'd call it your audience, you know? It's like who you know. Audience kind of spans both of these things. We'll leave those distinctions. The contacts can be in a community. It can be chatting with you. They can be curious. They can be just listening. Ultimately, like, not ultimately, some portion of your audience, some portion of the people that know who you are and you have contact and connection with, if they value what you do, you'll be able to convince them to become patrons. Oof. If you've seen the movie Wild at Heart, I could be the girl from Wild at Heart. So keeping that in mind, I'm trying to create this inner juicy layer. I want to create a nice place to chat, talk with, and even kind of like build stuff with patrons. I can only facilitate things like leaving a message in the podcast for patrons if I build this on Urbit. It's a complete mess any other way, but it's totally a thing that I can do. I just want to create a nice digital home, pun totally intended, for the people who are supporting me, so I can chat with them candidly and privately. We can discuss together as patrons as like a central core. And then I also want like a nice place for people who are just casual enjoyers, people who I have contact with. And occasionally you can use these contacts to make that pitch, make that claim like, hey, patrons get this. Patrons have this value. Even if it's, hey, this disappears unless there are patrons. Basically, YouTube here, I'm doing this part, which we're just gonna ignore for now because that's not what we're doing. I'm trying to build the next step. And so I'm glad you're here. For this. I'm top dog, like the best that you had. In the glorious past, if you typed in homebase.com, you'd be taken to this site. The project is called Hang Out with Musicians. Home is a total pun. I want people to feel at home and casual. Nothing is really being sold. Like, musicians have just this special shaman-like quality. Like, they're connected in the world in a way that other people aren't trying to be sensitive to and connect with. It's always a good time. It's always a good time with musicians. And this is the long-form podcast. Clicking here will take you to the podcast, little landing page. So let that load. The musicians that are involved, each one of these things goes to their own personal page because I wanted to link out to whatever they were doing at the time so that they can get support. Another button to listen to the podcast. So thank you to patrons. So, one of the tiny little perks, one of the least things that you can do. Shout them out, people being involved, accepting an email, so getting that contact, and then extra stuff down here that's not that valuable. This is a place that you tell people to go, and it has all the things that they need to know to understand it. It also hosts the podcast episodes. This is something Squarespace was allowing me to do. They had unlimited uploads. And so while it's not a podcast app, doesn't seem that way, you can create something like the podcast, or you can make a podcast using it, and it will host all of the episodes, and people can request for it and get it in a classic RSS feed, right? RSS feed and all the major things. Again, because I didn't pay my bills, lights cut off. If you go to homebase.com, that doesn't work. If you try to access the podcast and the podcast apps or whatever, they're not working. You can't download it. Yep. So that's the site. That's for people to go to and get what's happening. I want it to be better. Here's my complaint. Why does somebody have to go to my website? They have to leave their email as a little thing, and then I'll get back to them, and it's okay, and then we'll talk to you on Discord over there. We'll figure out what your username is over there. If you really want to talk to me and you really want to be close and support it, then you become a patron. Then you got to set up a whole Patreon account. Come here so I can send you everywhere else. Why can't we just be here's the website. It has all the podcasts and stuff. And also, we're chatting here. You just come down here and this is us chatting. Why the freak not? There's no reason for it to not be that way. And a part of that inspiration is, this is a completely famous person in the Urbit space, PalDev. On here, he made this thing. This is a public gateway to one of his lobbies. I ended up copying this and putting it on my own thing while it was working. Have a picture of it? Yeah, here we go. On the left here is the living, breathing lobby inside of my home group. This would be the chat where anybody could come in and talk. This is Nordis Mockwell/home. Over here is a public place where anybody can come to and connect with and then write down and chat over here. The chats will show up. I say, hello from Earth Lobby. And then inside I reply, perfect, this comes from Bird Lobby. Over here, I came in and I typed, hey, this Nordbird. This is an example of a fake Urbit ID passed out by the Earth Lobby. Thanks, PalDev. Urbit lets me connect the group. So I have this internal group, this inside group, right? I have my contacts, right? I have my people. I also have my patrons, but I can leave it open for acquaintances. It's actually really great at this layer, go to my website. It's actually the front door to my internal group. That's my ultimate goal. And it's gonna get into the nitty gritty. So you ain't seen nothing yet. I'm in so much trouble. Well, it's still early as far as the day goes. Late in the video. Woof, 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 woof. Like a lazy, tired dog. Woof. I'm top dog, like the best that you had. Check this out. I might blur the rest of it, but hey, Nordbird landed here after watching a couple of your Focus App videos. Hi, Mario. New friend. Hello. Welcome to the podcast. No, welcome to the YouTube channel. Got like the songs that I sing in my videos in my head, and I cut way more than I leave in. Now it's a vicious cycle. One thing I didn't mention for my model, go to the website. I'm trying to celebrate patrons. So if somebody is going to be so awesome as to become a patron and a supporter, I just want to like celebrate them, right? Like you just want to like shout it out there. That's why having thank you patrons at the end of YouTube videos are so powerful, and even podcasts will also have that, where it's like, oh, people who are listeners, if they interact with them, they can get their names said on the podcast. And it feels good. Like it feels really good. On the website, this is kind of a gimme. I think it's like by default, you're gonna want to thank my patrons. One of these like motivating arrows for pulling people in, I've kind of already made that argument. Tagging on this charity, I think is really powerful. It's a good draw in. I'm not trying to sell you anything. There's no sweet talk. There's no fast talk. It's just the thing that makes it possible for me to keep moving forward is by having people who support me. But there's also something like good that I want to do in the world. And I don't need to make a charity. I've just picked one. That's what's happening. That's a really good gravitational pull. So any musician who's seeing this and thinking about this, moving people into this space, I would highly recommend championing a charity and making sure that that's like consistent with your identity and message. I'm a lot slower than most when it comes to choosing to do things. Okay, yeah, home has a space. So on my localhost, I have bound localhost/home to this app. For the rest of the world to see it, I'm going to redirect homebase.com to go to a path on my Urbit, and then when people go to Homebase, go and grab the localhost/home and then pull it over and present it like that. This is what I have so far. So, whoopee. Title, Hangout Musicians. Because I have multiple seasons, I wanted to group them in multiple seasons where all of these guests are just in order of how they showed up. I want it to be reverse order. So I've got my seasons here. These are not clickable, but they are all of the podcast episodes. So myself and Megs, usually we have a third musician on and we talk to them. But in between all these blue ones, we have what we call a home duo, and it's just Megs and I chatting. Those are really fun too. It's been like over a year. I got married and I built a house and felt a whole lot of pressure to become like a working businessman, even though I like lived in the woods and coded on my computer. I mostly built this stuff and this podcast while living in the woods. It's hard to come back. It's hard to come back from that, okay? So yeah, season 2, it's got all the musicians, and then you insert the home duos. I have this weird thing that I'm calling season 1.5. Causes all kinds of problems, and that's why my digit is 15. I call that season 1.5 because I'm weird. And then the first season. And then my thank patrons. As far as the front page goes, it's not that far off. I'll need to get some images in there, but it is starting to get organized in the way that I liked. Hitting quit is never what I wanted. Right now, I am in the home desk of my developer comment. And let's take a look at how this is structured. Here, let's look at this part of the tree. So, hey, look, it's our good friend, the nested thing. Inside the app, this will be the app. I have decided to place the site in here. Penelope, what? Can you go outside? Go outside? Come on, let's go. All right. Say it like you mean it. Say it like you mean it. Ragabash. Check them out. Yeah, there you go. Austin band. I got a trumpeter. Oh yeah, freaking Spotify. Ragabash. If you like Levi and his work, there's an episode on that. We are going to make this simpler. We're going to make it so dang simple. We're going to use the most basic internet tools, things that aren't going to go away. If you remember from my front end video, I kind of decried browsers. I don't think the browser is going away. I think terminal user interface is going to be tried and true, and I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy it. But honestly, just having a terminal user interface and then mirroring that on a website is going to be a powerful thing. There's some work making those things compatible in a way that hasn't happened before. So that's exciting. Back over here, looking at the tree of this project, I have the website and I have the podcast. The website, it needs to have like the RSS feed. It needs to have the web page, which is under this thing called Sail, and then it needs to know how to make it look. So I have this style sheet. So like these files are what's going to make up the website, and these podcast episodes are going to end up being my podcast. Let's talk through the tools we're going to use. Does it look weird to you? It looks weird to me. I think there's a part of my brain that stops connecting words to meaning. I'm sure other people experience it, but maybe why I'm so weird. We want to serve a website that delivers a podcast. The tools that we're going to need, the very basic building blocks for being able to serve a website. You're going to need to write the HTML. You're going to need to write the CSS style, because if you don't, you end up getting something that looks like this. And it could look a lot worse. That's basic styling, but I would like for it to look a lot better. I'm also going to need an RSS feed. If you don't know what an RSS feed is, we'll just keep rolling with the podcast analogy. If you want to connect to a podcast, what do you need? Here's the thing that I like. Give me all of the episodes that are currently there, and if there's a new one, I want to get it. So that's called syndication, and RSS stands for real simple syndication. It's very colorful because it makes me feel like a huge slew of options that were not simple. This is really robust. It is as first-class internet-y as email is. The person who controls the RSS feed controls that thing. This is very different than Spotify. Spotify, if you give them your album, Spotify controls it. But RSS, totally open. Let me just label these things. HTML is really like website elements. This will be the style, and this is just the podcast. In Urbit land, in the Urbit world, we're also going to tag along a thing called Sail, and this is basically equivalent to HTML. So not going to worry too much about that. And we are also going to use a thing called Mast. Mast kind of gives us like HTML plus. If you're, more savvy in this realm, kind of like HTMX. In trying to understand HTML, RSS, and Sail, we'll talk about a Manx because it's relevant to all those things. Yarp. I'm going to take care of my doggo because she is really whining.